Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Before we get started, just a few logistics notes. Everyone will be in listen-only mode. We will have a Q&A session for 15 minutes at the end of this presentation. If you have any questions, please put them on the questions box and as they come up, and we will answer them at the end. The Q&A session will last around 15 minutes, and if we're not able to get through all your questions, we'll follow up with you after the webinar to get all those answered for you. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll be emailing you the webinar recording tomorrow. Thank you. My name is David Morales Vela. I have been working at SCS for the past 5 years, and I'll be assisting our presenter, Tony Hall, during today's webinar, Introduction to the SCS Gluten-Free Standard version 2.0. Here with us is Tony, so please, Tony, introduce yourself.
Hi there, everybody. This is Tony, excited to be here with you all.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to start with let me check, with the agenda for today. We're going to talk for we're going to talk briefly about SCS Global Services. Then we are going to cover the importance of getting gluten-free certified. Then we'll cover the basics of the SCS gluten-free standard. As a 4th point, we have the changes with the version 2 of the standard. This is going to be the most important part of this presentation, probably. And then we will be answering all your questions. Okay, we're going to start with SCS Global Services and what we do. So SCS Global Services is a company with almost 4 years of experience auditing, inspecting, in verification, certification, training, and consulting. We have more than 24,000 clients. We have issued more than 30,000 certifications in all major markets. We have worked with companies of different sizes, small, large, associations, government, NGOs, and community stakeholders. We are a leader in third-party environmental and sustainability certification and standards development. And as you know, we're going to talk about today about the gluten-free standard. That is, this is a standard owned by SCS Standards. And as part of our Food and Ag division, we offer different services. Here you can see just a handful of the services that SCS offers. We offer more than 100 programs of different industries. For Food and Ag, we have our product claims division, and there we offer USDA organic, the non-GMO project, gluten-free. Soon we will be offering a plant-based certification. We'll keep you posted about that. We also offer the most recognized food safety certification as SQF, BRCGS, Premium GFS, Global GAP, and other services that are not listed here. For example, we offer Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, and more. We also offer food safety training. So if you have any questions about this, at the end of the presentation, we'll have our sales director contact information, so you can contact us if you have any inquiries about any of these programs. That said, Tony will start now with the presentation. And Tony, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, for that. Hello, everybody. My name is Tony, and I am one of the auditors here on the SCS Gluten-Free team. So today we'll be going to talk about the SCS Gluten-Free standard and its updates in version 2, which was released earlier this month. So why should you be certified? Gluten is pervasive across the food system, and consumers may not know the potential for gluten exposure in their everyday eating habits. For clarification, gluten is a protein that naturally occurs in gluten-containing grains and may cause adverse health effects in persons with celiac disease. Gluten-containing grains is any species of wheat, rye, or barley, or their crossbred hybrids. As consumers become more and more aware of their diet, some consumers may want to know whether eating is in fact gluten-free. By being certified to a third-party certification such as the SCS Gluten-Free standard, you can show your customers you are committed to their health and food priorities. With more and more research being done on the health effects of our foods, we find a potential for a growing increase in people that have celiac disease or are gluten sensitive. This 2014 study illustrates the potential rise in these health issues and that there is more research to be done on the potential effects of gluten. The SCS Gluten-Free standard's aim is to increase consumer visibility. With that, in fact, it is our stated goal that we would like to help consumers make agile, safe, and informed purchasing decisions when looking for gluten-free products on their shelves. Furthermore, we want to help make the supply chain more transparent by certifying not just finished products that you can find on your store shelves, but also throughout the ingredient supply chain as well. The SCS gluten-free standard came out of a need to see a reliable gluten-free standard on the market. Our team here at SCS Global Services decided that with our years of expertise, we could create our own standard to present to consumers. Since the introduction of the SCS gluten-free standard in early 2021, we have quickly grown to certified hundreds of products on the market since the standard was introduced. Now that the standard has been updated and version 2 was released in October of 2022, which was just earlier this month here, we are happy to begin certification of that new version of the standard. Like David said earlier, when you get certified to the SCS gluten-free standard, you also get the opportunity to bundle your certification services with all the other services that SCS does offers. Some of the common bundles that we've been seeing with the SCS gluten-free standard is going to be organic certification or non-GMO project verification, as well as food safety certifications such as SQF, BRC, etc. In order to talk about the SCS gluten-free standard, we do want to note that the standard does have a specific definition of gluten-free. The SCS gluten-free standard recognizes the definition of gluten-free as a product that inherently does not contain gluten or does not contain an ingredient that is a gluten-containing grain. This could be wheat, rye, barley, anything in those families, or derived from a gluten-containing grain and that has not been processed to remove gluten. So a great example of this is going to be wheat flour. Or derived from a gluten-containing grain that has been processed to remove gluten, such as wheat starch, if the use of that ingredient results in the presence of 10 parts per million or more gluten in the product. Additionally, any any unavoidable presence of gluten in the product must be below 10 parts per million to be considered gluten-free. So what products can be certified to the SCS gluten-free standard? We can certify the following: processed foods, any form of raw material or ingredient, so like an almond flour perhaps, any primary products, so this could be any form of crops, so fruits, vegetables, herbs, etc., perhaps like apples or tomatoes. Supplements and homeopathic remedies, so anything that is not considered or is not considered a medicine. Goods for human use that are topically applied, so any form of lotions, etc. And then pet foods for domestic animals, if you are looking to provide food options for animals with gluten sensitivity. At this time, though, the SCS gluten-free standard does have a few types of general categories that are not allowed to be certified. Those are any form of medicine and drug, live animals, such as you can see here, this really adorable chicken, any controlled substance under applicable law. So at this time, that would mean marijuana, fermented or hydrolyzed materials, enzymes, or materials produced with an enzyme that have not been distilled to remove residual protein, and for which the substrate or growth media used to produce them is derived from a gluten-containing grain. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that last bullet point in the rest of the show. When we're looking at compliance to the standard, there are a few other requirements we want to review outside of just input compliance alone. When reviewing if a production facility can be compliant to a standard, we will be starting at reviewing what critical control points that the facility has identified as areas of potential gluten contamination. These points are vital to figuring out what potential risks for introduction to gluten contamination could exist throughout the production process. The standard is written in a way that requires all manufacturers to have procedures and processes that ensure gluten cannot be introduced into certified products. With these requirements, we can be confident in a facility's ability to control risk. To further increase confidence in the gluten-free standard, we couple process reviews of the critical control points with a sampling and testing regime all facilities must have and adhere to. With inputs, finished products, and equipment testing being a part of the standard, this will have a facility be able to catch contamination that could occur even with the critical control points, procedures, and processes in place. The SCS gluten-free standard requires that all ingredients, finished product, and equipment testing be tested to 10 parts per million at a minimum. If you're selling your products in a countries whose local laws require that any product being labeled as gluten-free must test to a lower threshold than 10 parts per million, you must test to that lower level. A really common example of this is going to be Australia, which does have a lower threshold. All testing must be done to the basic testing requirements that the standard outlines. You can find these standard testing requirements in Appendix 1A, or A1 and A2 of the standard, which we will be sending out to you later on. We will also be taking a quick look at these requirements later on in the presentation, as we have changed the testing requirements slightly in the second version of the standard. So when looking at ingredients, we separate these out into 3 risk levels: low, medium, and high. Low risk ingredients are ingredients that have minimal risk of gluten contamination in its supply chain. when you have a low-risk ingredient, you do not need to test that ingredient upon receipt. Medium risk ingredients are ingredients that have some risk of gluten contamination in its supply chain due to potential overlap with gluten-containing grains or gluten-containing ingredients. When you do have a medium risk ingredient in your products, they do need to be tested once upon receipt. Upon receipt, and one test per manufacturer's lot per shipment. High-risk ingredients are ingredients that have a high risk of gluten contamination in its supply chain due to overlap with gluten-containing grains or gluten-containing ingredients. The most common high-risk ingredient that we see are going to be oats. So if you're using oats in your facility or in your products, these will more than likely be considered high risk unless we can lower the risk level. High-risk ingredients must be tested upon receipt up to 3 tests per manufacturer's lots per shipment. We'll be talking about this a little bit later because I know the wording is a little bit confusing. Both finished product and equipment testing does depend on what risk level or risk type your facility is. We break down the facility types into 3 separate categories. Dedicated facilities, which means no gluten-containing ingredients are present in your production facility. The testing requirements of this type is 1 lot of finished product per month. No equipment testing is required, as no gluten-containing ingredients or products should be in the facility to risk contamination of the equipment. Dedicated facilities are eligible for virtual inspections in place of physical on-site inspections that are required for non-dedicated facilities. The next category is non-dedicated facilities with dedicated equipment. These facilities may still have gluten-containing ingredients or products in their facilities, but the equipment used to produce SCS gluten-free certified products are 100% dedicated to gluten-free production. If your facility falls under this categories, this means you will need to test 2 lots of certified product per month with no equipment testing required. Again, that is because no equipment should ever be used to produce gluten-containing products if you are using dedicated equipment. The last category is a non-dedicated facility with shared equipment. These facilities do have gluten-containing ingredients and products in the facility, and the equipment used to produce SCS gluten-free certified product is also used to produce gluten-containing products. If any production equipment in the facility is shared, the facility should be designated as this type. If your facility falls under this category, you will have to conduct both product testing and equipment testing as according to the requirements of the standard. We will talk a little bit more about those testing requirements further in the presentation. If your facility is non-dedicated, your inspection is not eligible to be virtual, and this will have to be done physically on site by one of our approved auditors. Again, this will be the both of the non-dedicated facility types. So whether you have dedicated equipment or shared equipment, we will have to do our inspection on site. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about what has changed with the second version of the standard. So just a quick overview of the major changes, and then we're going to go a little bit more in depth into what they are. All ingredients must have ingredient compliance documentation. There are new requirements of fermented, hydrolyzed, and distilled ingredients, also ingredients that are enzymes or are produced with enzymes. The addition of visual inspections for beans and seeds as finished products. Changes to testing requirements, The removal of the non-dedicated facility with proximal equipment category. So before we had 4 facility types, now we have 3. So we did remove the proximal equipment category. And then also wording of the standard and where different standard requirements are placed within the standard. We're not going to be discussing those changes to today specifically, but we will be talking about the rest of it. So ingredient compliance documentation. For each ingredient risk type, according to table 7.5 in the standard, minimum ingredient documentation will now be required. The type of documentation that can be used changes depending on the risk level and type of ingredient. While we don't have table 7.5 up here on this presentation right now, you can find that in the standard itself, which again we will be sending to you later on. You won't need all forms of documentation for ingredients that are listed on table 7.5, only the ones that will allow us to show the gluten-free status of the ingredient used in certified products. For low, medium, or high-risk ingredients that are not fermented, hydrolyzed, distilled, or made from an enzyme, the required documentation is actually pretty easy. It's usually just either a spec sheet or a supplier's statement that could be enough to prove compliance of those ingredients. We recommend trying to obtain gluten-free certifications, spec sheets, etc. first from your suppliers, and then go from there. This documentation will give us an understanding if any higher risk components could be in the ingredient and could help us in potentially lowering ingredient risk levels. Or we could then figure out what other types of documentation may be required to risk ingredients accurately. But in order to start now, again, like we said, we do recommend that you do try to start gathering the documentation that could be listed on table 7.5. So that can be gluten-free certificates, ingredients, spec sheets, supplier gluten-free statements, and the SCS affidavits that would be completed by your suppliers. Your auditor will be requesting these before your next inspection. So whether you're an initial client or a renewal client, we will be working with you to get those before your inspection. That way we can accurately risk your ingredients. The second version of the standard now has distilled, fermented, and hydrolyzed ingredients and enzymes or ingredients produced with enzymes as a separate category. Distilled, fermented, hydrolyzed materials, enzymes, or materials produced with an enzyme that are used as ingredients or components of ingredients that have not been distilled will need additional documentation to prove compliance. The following items can be used to prove compliance: a gluten-free certification, documentation showing that the substrate or growth media used is not derived from a gluten-containing grain, ingredient manufacturer's statements showing the definition of gluten-free and confirming the ingredient contains less than 10 parts per million of gluten. And again, that definition of gluten-free is exactly what we said earlier in the slide. Those definitions do need to match. Or the SCS gluten-free declaration. For all relevant ingredients that do fall under this category, we do recommend that you begin collecting the additional compliance documentations that are listed out here. Your auditor will request these before your next inspection. Again, we would recommend first trying to gather gluten-free certifications first, and then go from there onto the other 3 bullet points if you're not able to gather those certifications. You do not need to use all of the different compliance pathways listed here. Depending on what documentation is submitted, we may be able to even lower the risk levels of the ingredient itself. If you submit a gluten-free certificate from a third-party certification that tests to 10 parts per million or lower, or if a supplier's statement is submitted, or the SCS gluten-free declaration is submitted, or or you can show that the substrate or growth media of the ingredient is a low-risk crop source, we can have the ingredient be classified as low risk. If the substrate or growth medium is a medium risk crop, and we find that out either from the supplier's statement or the SCS gluten-free declaration, we can have the ingredient classified as medium risk. Again, all ingredients are reviewed down to their different components. So we always look at the highest risk component of those ingredients in order to assign an accurate risk level. Note on these different ingredients. These ingredients or components of the ingredients that have not been distilled to remove residual protein and for which the substrate or growth media used to produce them is derived from gluten-containing grains are not eligible to be used in certified products. So this has to be that the ingredients or their components have to meet both of these parts in order to not be eligible in certified products. Note on distilled ingredients and components separately. Distilled ingredients and distilled components for which the substrate used to produce them is derived from a gluten-containing grain shall verify the absence of protein using testing methods that can reliably detect the presence or absence of protein or protein fragments. So we would need to confirm that there is testing in place to ensure that there is no residual gluten protein in the ingredient. This is done with most test kits on the market. Your auditor can help you review that the test kit will test for proteins like we do for your other testing requirements. Visual inspections. So a new addition to the standard is going to be visual inspections. If beans and seeds are sold as finished goods, a 2.5 kilograms sample of each lot must be visually inspected to confirm it does not contain any gluten-containing grain. So in order to get into compliance with the second version of the standard, if you have any finished products that are considered beans or seeds, you must now include the visual inspection in your sampling and testing plans and any relevant SOPs that we would want to review as well. Your auditor will be reviewing this documentation during your inspection, and you're also going to be wanting to train your employees on this new requirement of the standard if beans and seeds are your finished products. In another change to the standard, we have removed the facility category non-dedicated facility with proximal equipment. We did change the facility classifications to simplify how we review facilities and assign testing requirements. With this new change, this means most facilities with that previous designation will now become classified as non-dedicated facilities with dedicated equipment under the new standard. If your facility previously fell in the non-dedicated facility with proximal equipment, if you were certified to the first version of the SCS gluten-free standard, your category, your auditor, excuse me, will work with you to confirm during your renewal that your facility meets the non-dedicated facility with dedicated equipment category. We do ask that if this does apply to you, you will now note the difference in testing requirements in the standard. This brings us to one of our more important changes that we wanted to address during this presentation today, and that is changes to the testing requirements in the second version of the standard. So first we're going to look at finished goods and equipment testing. So please see here the top chart that lists out those testing requirements. For facilities that are dedicated and also non-dedicated with dedicated equipment, so that's going to be these first two categories here, or lines, I should say, the testing requirements have not changed with the second version of the standard. For non-dedicated facilities with shared equipment, we do have changes to the testing requirements. So in the facilities with shared equipment, you will now test 3 lots of SCS gluten-free certified finished products after you are running a gluten-containing product on the same production line. So it will be the next 3 lots of production of your SCS gluten-free certified product when you do run a gluten-containing product beforehand. Additionally, you're also going to be required to do equipment testing. So you will test 3 locations on the equipment after a gluten-containing product is run before your gluten-free production. So you'll probably will want to test the 3 highest risk areas on your equipment that you find through your critical control point review that may be at highest risk of cross-contamination. So this will have to be done anytime after you do a gluten-containing production run, and then you're going to be doing a gluten-free certified production run afterwards. For the changes in the ingredient testing, please see this bottom chart here. For low and medium risk ingredient testing, there has been no changes in the second version of the standard. For low risk ingredients, like we mentioned earlier, there is no testing required for those categorized ingredients. For medium risk ingredients, it is required that you do 1 test per manufacturer's lot per shipment. So the changes are all in the high risk ingredient category. So for ingredients that are labeled under that risk level, again, the most common example of this would be oats. You will need to test 3 times per lot per shipment for each container. If the ingredient shipment lot is in 3 containers or less, you will only need to test once per container. If the shipment lot is in more than 3 containers, you will just need to choose 3 containers at random in that lot in order to test them. For these ingredients, we have made these changes because we got a lot of feedback that our original high risk ingredient testing requirements were strenuous. So we did decide to change this in order to make the testing process simpler, but yet still ensure integrity to the standard and the product. So on these changes to the testing requirements, please do note these new testing requirements. Again, that only applies if you have high risk ingredients or if you are a non-dedicated facility with shared equipment, and you will need to change your sampling and testing plan that you already have on file with SCS if you are a client that was certified to the first version of the standard, or if you were looking to get SCS gluten-free certified B4 and we're trying to figure out what your testing requirements were going to be, please also update those requirements as you look to apply to be SCS gluten-free certified. Your auditor will be requesting these updated plans. Again, if you are a currently certified customer, during your renewal prior to your inspection. So that way we can ensure during your inspection you are testing to the correct testing requirements. So with that is all that I have to say about the SCS gluten-free standard and also all of the changes that have come about with version 2. So thank you so much for your time. It's now time. We're going to have a little bit of a Q&A session that David, I believe you are going to go ahead and facilitate. So David, if you wouldn't mind taking it away.
Of course, Tony, thank you. We're gonna wait now for a couple of minutes. People are starting sending questions. So far we have like 6 questions, but we're gonna give in everybody a couple of minutes to enter any additional questions you may have, and we will start answering them shortly.
This is also a great time if anybody is interested in talking to us more about getting gluten-free certified, or also getting certified to any of the other certifications that SCS does have to offer. We do welcome you to please contact our Director of Sales, Ned. Ned is fantastic, and he can kind of explain the process to you as much as he possibly can. You can go ahead and see his contact information here. You can give him a call or shoot him an email at nhalaby@scsglobalservices.com. You can also fill out an interest form on our website. We list out all of our programs there at scsglobalservices.com, and and so you can look at every service that we do offer, and then I believe each of them has some form of contact me form that you can look through there.
Okay, perfect. So we have quite a few questions now, and let's start. So the first question is how I can reduce the risk of an ingredient to lower the testing requirements.
Oh yeah, so that is a really good question. So there are a few different pathways that you can do that. The best way is going to source your ingredient from a source your ingredient that is already gluten-free certified from a third-party gluten-free certification that tests to at least 10 parts per million. So a great example is if your ingredient is already SCS gluten-free certified, we can then have that ingredient be considered low risk, even if it would be considered medium or high risk otherwise. Another example, or something else you can submit, is going to be the SCS ingredient declaration. So that is a form that we do have that is specific to the SCS gluten-free program that we can send to you to have your ingredient suppliers fill out. That will essentially ask a few different questions in order to see if we're able to lower the risk level of that product. If you have a distilled, fermented, hydrolyzed ingredient, or an enzyme or an ingredient that's produced with an enzyme, we would probably want some form of documentation, which would be, again, that ingredient declaration, maybe a supplier's statement, something along those lines, that proves that the growth media that is used to produce those ingredients is either a low risk or a medium risk crop, or crop source, I should say, which then would reduce the risk level of those ingredients. But when you do submit your ingredients to us, and if you submit your ingredient spec sheets, your auditor will be reviewing that ingredient and all of its components, and we'll be calling out any of the components that we believe are going to be either medium or high risk during that initial review, and we'll kind of let you know the different pathways that you can do to try to lower your testing requirements, because we definitely want you to lower that risk level if possible.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. So let's move on with the questions. Which category corresponds to a product that uses probiotics?
that would probably be in a fermented ingredient category.
Correct.
I would say, yeah. Okay, that's what I was thinking. Thank you for agreeing with me there, David. So if you do have a product that is going to be a probiotic, we're probably going to want to look again at that growth media, that feed source that is given to that probiotic product. So if, just for example, if it's fed a glucose derived from corn, it will be then considered a medium risk product. If it is for whatever reason grown on a on a dextrose source from oats, then it'll be considered a high risk product. And if it's grown on something such as like sugar beet, it would be considered a low risk product. So, so we would just need to kind of go back to the source of the probiotics themselves and figure out what those crop sources are in order to accurately risk them.
Perfect. Next question. How can we get a copy of the updated standard?
That is a great question. You can always go onto scsglobalservices.com and you can go onto our SCS gluten-free standard page and you can see the link there to download it. You can also always contact Ned. Again, you can either give him a call or you can send him off an email and he will be happy to send you over the standard as well.
Perfect. Next question. Can you elaborate more on why enzyme fermentation medium with gluten-containing ingredients cannot be labeled gluten-free even after the FG, I'm not sure what that means, has been third-party tested for gluten and passes below the threshold?
Yeah, so according to, and I may be getting the agency wrong because, off the top of my head, I'm not 100% remembering the exact agency, but I want to say the USDA, whoever kind of implements the rules for the US federal guidance on gluten-free and gluten labeling requirements. Processes such as fermentation, hydrolyzation, producing products with enzymes do not adequately destroy gluten-containing or gluten proteins in products, or there is no way to reliably guarantee that they are destroying those proteins enough to essentially say that there is no residual protein left. So if you have one of those ingredients, that is why we require that further testing because it's not 100% guaranteed per the research that was given out by the federal guidance. So we do require that it is considered it is sourced from a non-gluten containing grain or that it tests below 10 parts per million in any form of certification scheme. Yeah, but if it is distilled though, to remove those residual proteins, then we can certify those products or those ingredients. But if it's not distilled, we do need more. It should not be derived from gluten-containing grain. David, do you have anything else to add to that? I may have not answered the question 100% completely.
Yeah, I think it's the answer was great. The only thing I would like to clarify, that's part of the FDA label and rule for gluten-free products. And this rule states that there are not tests that can ensure that that those tests, that the result of those tests are reliable for fermented and hydrolyzed products. That's why only distilled products can be SCS gluten-free certified if they are if the starting material is a gluten-containing grain. We can send that information to the person that asked this. We can send you the resources. Unfortunately, the FDA states that it could, the producer can test the finished products that are hydrolyzed or fermented that have been produced with a gluten-containing using a gluten-containing grain. However, the tests that are available are not the FDA is saying that the tests that are available in the market cannot determine if there's a residual gluten in the finished product or in the finished ingredient. That's why we have decided to not don't allow this type of materials until the FDA approves a type of test that will allow us to make sure that the gluten has been removed from hydrolyzed or fermented materials. Perfect. I'm going to go for the next question, Tony. How long it takes to certify new products?
That is a really great question, and it really depends a lot on your timing as the participant. We've seen people be certified in as little as 2 to 3 weeks upon the start of the process, upon the initial scoping process. But oftentimes, I will say we kind of give an estimated time of between 2 and 4 months during your first inspection, or during your first year. And the reason why is because it does take time to collect all of the different input compliance documentation that is going to be required. We're going to have to find time out of all of our schedules to, of course, schedule your on-site inspection, and then there is a lot of time given to try to resolve any findings that are found during your on-site inspection. And a lot of times initial clients do tend to have a little bit of a few more findings during their either virtual or physically on-site inspections that do need to be addressed. That does just take a little bit more time than usual. So we like to give 2 months as like an optimistic time frame, 4 months as a little bit more of a realistic time frame. But again, it really does largely depend on how quickly you can work with your suppliers to get the required documentation, and how quickly you can work with your team to resolve any findings that are found during your inspections.
Great. Next question is, what type of documentation is needed to sell in countries with more restrictive testing requirements than 10 ppm?
Yeah, so your production facility, so whether that is you as the participant who is also the producer of your products, or your co-packers, they will be required to have the regulations of any country that is not the US, Canada, or the EU as a whole for their gluten labeling laws on file. So when we're doing our on-site inspection, if you're selling in, if you have a selling market that's not the US, Canada, or the EU, we will be reviewing that you do have those regulations on file, and those regulations should specify whether or not the country's gluten labeling laws are 10 parts per million or lower, or even more than 10 parts per million.
Perfect. Next question is, at what time the ingredient documentation will be reviewed?
The ingredient documentation will be reviewed before your inspection. So the way that the general process works is you submit to us your product profile, which essentially will give us all of the different ingredients that are going to be in your products, and you're going to also be listing out all the different components that make up the individual ingredients of your products. So a good example of that could be a extract. An extract will probably have some form of maybe like an ethanol as the extraction method, and then let's say like a peppermint oil or something like that if it's a peppermint extract. So we would want to know the different components of that ingredient. So once you submit that to us, then we're also going to be then asking afterwards for the different ingredient compliance documentation. Like I said, there's going to be the different pathways listed on table 7.5. So you can start submitting to that. So submitting that to us once we start your audits. That'll be after our initial kickoff meeting. And we will let you know if there's any higher risk or any ingredients that are commonly fermented, distilled, hydrolyzed, etc. And what type of documentation we need for those specific ingredients. Yeah, so it'll be kind of in the very beginning process that we'll be looking for that.
Perfect. And we have one more question, and it's, is this recorded or can we get the slides?
Yes, this will definitely be recorded. We'll be sending this out, David, correct me if I'm wrong, tomorrow to you via email.
Correct.
Okay, cool. And will this also be up on the website, David?
Yes, it will be uploaded on the website within the next few days, but all participants will receive an email with a link to the recording by tomorrow.
Great, amazing. Yeah, so you'll get to hear this again and again starting tomorrow. I know you're going to want to run it in the background, just as you're going throughout your day, of course.
Perfect. That could be everything for today. Thank you, Tony, for the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Please remember, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Ned's information is shown there. Please, if you have any questions, either about the program, the workflow, the costs, anything, don't hesitate to contact us. We will be happy to assist you. I don't know if there's any last thing you want to mention, Tony. If not, we can conclude with the webinar for today.
No, I just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to talk with us today about this standard. We're super excited for the second version of it to be released, and we really do look forward to you all becoming a part of the SCS family if you're not already and getting your products certified.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.